Hey guys, what's up? It's super cold, so hopefully these butterflies remind you that something warmer is coming eventually, hopefully, maybe. My name's Katie, and we're chatting about servant leadership today. We'll start off nice and easy with an outline. Today we're covering the history, definition, models, strengths, criticisms, application, and how this relates to nutrition and dietetics. Now that you know what's going on, I'm going to tell you a little story about the inspiration behind it all. This theory is based on Hermann Hesse's novel, The Journey to the East, and essentially, there's a group of travelers on a mythical journey, and one of the travelers brings along a servant to do basic chores and clean up after everyone. But he has such good vibes, he sings a lot of songs, keeps everyone happy and in a good mood, and his presence impacts the group and helps them along their journey. When the servant becomes lost and separated, the travelers descend into chaos and abandon their mission altogether. So, essentially, the point you're supposed to get from this is the servant was leading the group through his selfless care of the travelers and was the leader the whole time, even though you might not think of a servant as being a leader. Robert K. Greenleaf, the father of servant leadership, credits the formulation of servant leadership to the story. Okay, like I said, he was the first person to use the term, and his writings have influenced the practical and theoretical development. He worked for AT&T for 40 years, and then after retiring, he began to examine how institutions could better serve society. He looked at issues of power and authority within organizations and attempted to understand how individuals and organizations could support each other. He advocated for communication to build consensus. He also stated that the servant leader has the responsibility to care for the have-nots and those less privileged. He valued a face-to-face opportunity for individuals to experience interdependence, respect, trust, and growth. Okay, now I'm going to give you a definition, and just a disclaimer, I feel like this definition can be very subjective, and servant leadership can mean something different to everyone, but we'll work for this for now. So, servant leadership is a leadership theory that focuses on the relationship between the leader and the followers. It places the well being of the followers above the leader's own self interest. The leader should emphasize follower development, demonstrate good moral behavior, and care about followers' personal development and goals. It may come naturally for some, but servant leadership is a behavior that anyone can learn and pick up and put the behaviors, like incorporate them into their own style of leadership. Okay, so these are 10 characteristics in Greenleaf's writing. You can read those there, and they're vital to servant leadership development. These also serve as the first model of servant leadership. I'm going to give a brief explanation of these, but because the definition has evolved, I'm going to go more in depth in the leadership model later on. The first characteristic is listening because communication between leaders and followers is important for accomplishing tasks and establishing relationships. Servant leaders communicate by listening first. I have a shoe next to empathy because empathy is standing in the shoes of another person and trying to see the world from their point of view. Servant leaders should work to understand what their followers are thinking and feeling in order for the follower to feel validated. Healing means to make one whole. So the leader should be committed to the personal well-being of followers and support them through personal issues. Awareness refers to the leader's ability to view themselves in a greater context. They are attuned and receptive to physical, social, and political environments. Persuasion is a little tricky because it can be confused with coercion or even manipulation, and both of those miss the point. Persuasion is clear and consistent communication that inspires change. I like persuasion because it implies consistency and transparency of expectations. Foresight is the leader's ability to know the future. They should be able to predict the future by drawing conclusions from the past and present. Conceptualization is the leader's ability to be a visionary for the organization. When a leader conceptualizes, they are looking beyond day-to-day tasks and focusing on long-term goals. Stewardship is the leader taking responsibility for their leadership role and accepting the responsibility to manage an organization. Commitment to the growth of people sounds just like its name. Each follower should be treated as a unique person with value that goes beyond their role in the organization. Servant leaders should foster the growth of their followers by offering development opportunities, taking an interest in their work, and involving them in decision making. Building community allows followers to think more broadly and be a part of something bigger than themselves. Leaders should focus on building a community where followers feel safe to express individuality. This image is from our textbook and sums up the model of servant leadership. I feel like it is the best way to explain modern leadership. I'm breaking the next sections into 3 categories: antecedent conditions, then we're going to talk about the behaviors, and then we'll talk about the outcomes. Now we're covering antecedent conditions. If you remember the chart, these guys are on the left. So, context and culture influences how leaders lead because we do not exist in a vacuum. Leaders are influenced by their environment and the world they live in. This can be more organizational. For example, the contrast between the competitiveness of a corporate Wall Street environment or the caring environment of working for a nonprofit organization. Context and culture can also refer to the geographical location and culture of a leader and their followers. What comes to mind for me is the United States' focus on the individual. Our country champions interpersonal growth and individualistic goals. It's cool to be a creative thinker and go against the norm. We see this in popular slogans such as Apple's Think Different campaign or Vans' Off the Wall. Both of these slogans praise people who go against the grain and do the seemingly impossible. They go over really well in the US's individualistic society. However, if these advertisers were developing campaigns in Japan, a collectivist society, these ads could look different. Collectivism focuses on the community, decisions are made by reaching a consensus, very focused on like the whole. So if you were an advertiser for Apple or Vans in Japan, how might you alter these ads pictured here to better fit the culture there? You can think about this question or toss your ideas on the discussion board if you want, because I love reading that stuff. I think advertising is really cool. Leader attributes, the traits and qualities of individual leaders, influence a person's ability to be a servant leader. This antecedent seems somewhat obvious because obviously we're all unique, so everyone's going to bring something different to the table. People differ in their moral development, emotional intelligence, and motivation, which affects their ability to lead. For example, someone with a strong sense of morality might also be really religious and unintentionally use parts of their religion in their leadership. One of the universal truths in Buddhism is everything in life is impermanent and always changing. A servant leader who happens to practice Buddhism may remind their team of this belief of impermanence and encourage their team to always plan ahead for new situations and curveballs. Recent research has sought to determine if there are specific traits that are important for or prominent in servant leaders. Emotional intelligence is a person's ability to sense the feelings and beliefs of their followers. I kind of refer to this as intuition. But it's an important service trait. It's an important trait for service leaders because it allows them to relate to their followers and be in tune to their feelings. Research has also found that having humility makes a servant leader more impactful to followers, helps foster team growth, increases employee engagement, and job satisfaction. Follower receptivity measures the impact servant leadership has on followers. This condition attempts to answer the question, do all followers desire servant leadership? To answer this question, no, they do not, but that's not a bad thing. All people are different and look for different things from their leaders. Some people find servant leaders to be micromanaging and they just don't want that personal relationship with their leader. However, whenever followers who desire servant leadership and value servant leadership are matched with servant leaders, their job performance and organizational behavior improve. Which makes sense. If you have what you're looking for in your work environment and you're given what you need, obviously your productivity and happiness will go up. Now we're going to talk about the servant leader behaviors. If you remember the model, the 7 behaviors are in the middle section. These behaviors come from Leiden's research, during which they developed and validated a way to measure servant leadership. They found that these behaviors are the focus of servant leadership and that each behavior has a unique contribution to the overall servant leader. Conceptualizing is the leader's ability to understand the organization. The leader should solve problems and work according to the overall goals of the organization. At the bottom of the slide, I have the mission statement for EIU's Masters in Dietetic Internship Program. The leaders and directors in this program work to develop an experience that ensures the followers, which would be the students, meet the goals outlined in the mission. One example I came up with comes from the highlighted portion of this mission statement. To meet this goal, leaders developed assignments and experiences that require students to incorporate theory-based information and research into assignments and supervised practice. For example, last semester, my class worked to improve the health disparities experienced by veterans. We use research to justify the need for our programs, theoretical knowledge to develop an effective program, and evidence-based sources to ensure the education information we provided was credible. This assignment required me to use a certain number of peer-reviewed sources and had to have a theoretical basis, so it was in line with the mission. And I included this example to try and bring these points to life and show you that servant leadership is everywhere. Emotional healing refers to the leader's sensitivity to personal concerns and well-being of others. Servant leaders should be available and willing to support their followers through hard times. Putting followers first is a defining characteristic of servant leadership. The leader needs to use their words and actions to clearly demonstrate that followers' needs are a priority. An example of this comes from my undergrad days. One of my professors always made herself available to students and showed an interest in our lives outside of school. I remember one time in class, this boy was kind of worried about a date that he had that evening, so she stopped class and gave him advice on the date, and then everyone else in the class kind of weighed in too. It was super wholesome. Um, so she provided emotional healing by making herself available and giving him support. She also put her followers first by putting her lesson agenda on hold for a few minutes to meet the needs of her students. Servant leaders also help their followers grow and succeed. They take an interest in personal and professional goals and help their followers accomplish them. Servant leaders want their followers to reach their fullest potential. An example of this comes from my own parents. As you probably know, because I talk about it all the time, my family owns a haunted house, and during the off season, they take time to develop and involve the staff and pick out ideas and things, like take their ideas into account to create things that interest them. I didn't change the slide, I'm sorry. So last year, a couple girls mentioned they wanted to get better at makeup. That was one of their goals, so they hosted a makeup class for them. I included a couple pictures at the bottom here, because I think it's a cool thing that they did. And they didn't even realize that they were following a leadership philosophy or anything like that. They just did it to be nice. Servant leaders also behave ethically. They are open, honest, and fair with followers. Even when faced with the choice between acting unethically and achieving success or behaving ethically and possibly not achieving success, servant leaders choose to act with integrity and abide by ethics. Something interesting this theory includes is that the servant leader should disclose potential dishonesty or unethical behavior. Servant leaders should also allow their followers to be independent. They should encourage followers to make decisions on their own and be self-sufficient. This allows them to share control. It builds followers' self-confidence in their abilities to act on their own. A 2017 study found that empowerment leadership resulted in proactive employees. Employees had higher levels of self-efficacy in their role when they were allowed and encouraged to be more independent at work. Servant leaders also create value for the community. They consciously and intentionally give back when they can. They encourage followers to participate in local activities and community service. I've seen this in my classes at EIU, where we've been tasked with developing nutrition programs that serve members of the local community. Now we're transitioning to the last part of the model, the outcomes. So there's 3 outcomes: follower performance and growth, organizational performance, and societal impact. Servant leaders should focus on followers and help them realize their full potential. With plenty of nurturing from leaders, help with personal goals, and the ability to take control, followers will achieve self-actualization. Another outcome of servant leadership is a positive impact on role performance. Researchers found that when servant leaders were matched with followers receptive to servant leadership, their performance improved. They are more effective at performing their job functions. Another result is that followers may feel inspired and empowered enough by their servant leader that they become a servant leader themselves. So if they're constantly acting a certain way with their leader, then they'll just carry that into other aspects of their life. And it's kind of a cycle like that. The next outcome is organizational performance. Servant leadership has been shown to increase team effectiveness by increasing teams' confidence in themselves. Servant leadership helps teams believe they are effective workers and capable of accomplishing tasks. However, more research is needed in this area. Because servant leadership focuses on the relationship between the leader and the follower and utilizes a follower-first mentality, it has a positive impact on society. This is not commonly measured in studies, but there are very real examples in our world today. For me personally, just reading the word, I immediately thought of Saint Mother Teresa. Her years of service to the poor, homeless, and hungry had a huge impact on the world, and she even founded the Missionaries of Charity, a new religious order that now services over 1 million people worldwide. I also appreciate the irony of this. She served people who society tried to cast out, ignore, and get rid of, but her impact is so great that we cannot forget her work, and we certainly cannot ignore it. Now we're going to talk about the strengths. Servant leadership is unique in the way it makes altruism a vital part of the leadership process. Altruism is selfless concern for others. So servant leaders are unique in that the most important part of their philosophy is the care and concern for others. It's the only leadership approach that bases the process around care for others. It also does the opposite of all other leadership theories by regarding power as a negative thing. Servant leaders should not dominate, control, or direct. They should share control and influence. Research has found that when followers prefer servant leadership and want to be led in this way, it yields positive results. There's also a sound way to measure servant leadership, the Servant Leadership Questionnaire, and it's proved to be a useful and acceptable tool for servant leadership research. Lastly, servant leadership can be applied to nearly any level of management. Shift leaders, teachers, CEOs, and entrepreneurs can incorporate these behaviors into their leadership and be an effective servant leader. However, with strengths also come criticisms. The first is that the name is a paradox. People have certain expectations and preconceived notions around the words servant and leadership, so putting the two together seems like a contradiction. This results in servant leadership being perceived as flaky. Researchers are also at odds over a universal definition and theoretical framework of servant leadership, and they debate over the core dimensions. So until there's a larger body of research about what it actually is, we're kind of stuck there. And another criticism is that putting others first is commendable, but sometimes people find it very overwhelming in that role because they have to put others first, but also focus on the other things that come with leading an organization, such as autonomy, goal setting, increasing production, and following a vision. So that can be overwhelming. Lastly, researchers are unclear why conceptualizing is included. They don't know if it's a behavior or a cognitive ability. They agree that being able to conceptualize is an important skill in leadership, but they're not sure why it's a defining characteristic for servant leadership, so more research needs to be done. To apply servant leadership, you should try and select people with the ability and desire to form long-term relationships. They have high integrity and morals. And training to establish servant leadership should include self-assessment exercises, emotional intelligence development exercises, and education on empowering others and how to effectively do that without coming off as obnoxious. Like I said above, servant leadership can be applied to a variety of different organizations, and people at nearly every level of an organization can apply concepts of servant leadership. Some examples that come to mind that are related to nutrition and dietetics are the dietitian's relationship with the client she counsels in both the inpatient and outpatient settings. She incorporates the emotional healing behavior into her counseling by being sensitive to the personal concerns and well-beings of her clients. If her clients are worried about how much time it will take to cook their meals at home rather than eating out, the dietitian should be sensitive to these concerns, recognize them, and support the client as they make that change. The dietitian in this setting should also help her clients grow and succeed by helping them set achievable goals and provide support along their journey. If the client is experiencing ambivalence towards making a lifestyle change, the dietitian should empower the individual by letting them take control of their lives and make decisions. For example, if a client is told they need to exercise 5 days a week, but they're worried about exercising 5 days a week, it seems way too daunting for them, the dietitian should work with the client and help them decide on a more reasonable goal they can accomplish. I always refer to this as like letting the client drive for a minute, like putting them in the driver's seat. Maybe they decide that 3 days a week is more manageable. So the dietitian should support them in that and help them reach that conclusion. Dietetics in the food service management realm should have open communication with their staff. They should be sensitive and attentive to their followers' personal issues and concerns. It's a very stressful job. Tensions run high in food service. When I worked in food service, that's what I noticed at least. So the dietitian should be ready and able to pause their own tasks in order to help out a follower who is struggling to complete their to-do list. For example, a food service director at a school might have to go sub in the kitchen and spend a day in the dish room for one of the schools if that kitchen is shorthanded, thereby putting their own tasks like on hold for the day. Food service workers are also susceptible to burnout. Research has found that a close interpersonal relationship with a manager increases employee job satisfaction. And it just means a lot to know that sometimes you feel disposable in those positions. Like, if you come to work and you know that someone cares if you're there and cares how you're doing, that can just increase job satisfaction. It can improve your mood and make you feel a whole lot better about going to work. Dietitians in this setting should also recognize that staff might have personal ambitions outside of their role and be prepared to mentor them if that's something the follower wants. The person I interviewed for the key informant assignment noticed one of her followers who worked in the hospital cafeteria had an interest and knack for nutrition. This girl seemed to want to know more, so the person I interviewed pulled her aside for a chat about her personal goals and found out that the young woman wanted to do something more related to nutrition. So the person I interviewed mentored her and helped her obtain her DTR certification, and now she's working as a dietitian technician registered. So that's really cool. You can kind of help them. It's a double-edged sword, I feel like, because you're losing that employee if you're mentoring them to do something better, but the fulfillment and satisfaction and happiness that I think I would get from helping someone achieve their dreams, I think that would just be so cool. A little sappy. Lastly, dietitians in the community setting may have to create value for the community. When developing wellness programs and initiatives, they have to take the collective health of the community and place it above their own personal agenda. I've seen this in the context of the pandemic. The early days of the pandemic were so incredibly stressful and uncertain. A lot of dietitians on my Instagram feed posted information about taking care of yourselves, and sometimes when you're so overwhelmed by the world, just getting fed or eating enough is more important than agonizing over whether or not it's healthy or aesthetically pleasing. So these dietitians, to give that advice to people, these dietitians had to put aside their own personal beliefs about what a healthy plate should look like in order to show their followers that it is okay to not be on top of it all the time, and fed is always best. Okay, here are my references. References the sequel because I think I'm funny. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions or you want to chat more about this, feel free to use the discussion board. You can reach out to me personally if you want. I think you all have my number. But I hope you have a great Valentine's Day. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.